Welcome to the Startup Leader Show, where we learn lessons from startup founders and executives. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Joe Epstein. He is a strategic partnership leader over at Lockheed Martin Space. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Hi, Lisa. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for making time for this. Maybe you can start by giving us just a little background on yourself and
Sure.
Lockheed Martin Space.
Sure. I've spent my entire professional career with Lockheed Martin Space. Most of that time has been as a material scientist. So I worked at the Advanced Technology Center, which is essentially the skunk works of space, if you want to think of it that way, the R&D wing. So I had to know very specific technology, mostly with nanotechnology, some things with propellants, and I had to know those in a big amount of depth. And then, my career shifted, and eventually I started getting more business development chops. And I was asked to sort of look into, leading this effort for external engagements. And I applied and was accepted into the role. And I've really enjoyed it. And it's been sort of, a new, part of my career. So now I have to know all about space in a much more broader sense and much less depth. And so I find it very exciting. I interact with subject matter experts all across the space spectrum, as well as influencers and technology leaders across the Lockheed Martin enterprise.
Wow, amazing. So tell us a little bit about what Lockheed Martin Space is doing.
Sure. Lockheed Martin Space, we essentially provide hardware and software that has to work in a 1G environment. That's the way I simply put it. A lot of people don't understand why missiles are part of that, but missiles do leave the atmosphere. Our customers are about two-thirds are from the DoD, and about one-third is more of the NASA commercial area. So we certainly have many contracts that are in our special programs and military space part, which is where you need clearances, but these are more on Earth observation technologies. But we do anything and everything to space. We've been on every mission to Mars. We've collected a sample from an asteroid that'll be arriving here later this year. So we've certainly been to places in deep space and performed space missions that no other company has. I'm very proud of that. And as we continue to work with small businesses and help us deliver on those aspirations that we keep working towards.
Wow, amazing. So really, really exciting. And, I kind of did the opener where I said, oh, yeah, we speak with startup founders and executives. Obviously, you're not a startup founder or executive, but you do work with a lot of small businesses.
Correct.
And that's really why we brought you here today. And we specifically really want to dig into the SBIR and STTR programs. So maybe you can give us a little bit of background on what are these programs and why are they important to small businesses?
Sure. The SBIR, which stands for Small Business Innovative Research, STTR stands for Small Technical Transfer Research. These are programs that have actually been around, I think, for 40 years, since they were started in the mid 80s. There is, within the contracts of the government, is a requirement that 5% of all of the DoD business goes to small businesses in some way. And this is part of the execution of that promise. And so, it's been in its own way, it's been quite successful. It's set up for in a phase one and a phase two, and then the ultimate is the phase three. Phase three is much more commercialization. Phase one is a very small award. It's a feasibility study. It's essentially showing either the DoD or NASA that you have an ability to perform this technology, and they write up the customers end up writing a sort of a topic, which is a problem set, and these small businesses answer that in a feasibility study. If that study is awarded, they go then work through that phase one and they work to a phase two. Phase two is much more of a prototype where you take the feasibility part and you actually begin, if you are awarded the contract from the government, you have to build a prototype. And eventually that should, at the end of that prototype, in theory, that should be ready for some sort of place where a prime like Lockheed Martin could find a pathway for insertion. That's a very simple overview of it. It goes into much more nuances. Of course, Congress got involved last year. I won't go into that, but the program's been tweaked and changed a little bit since they approved the funding of it last year. But that's kind of the overview of the program, if that explains it.
Got it. So Lockheed Martin doesn't actually award these contracts, right? And
Correct.
so tell us a little bit about what Lockheed Martin's I guess role is in these
Sure.
programs.
Sure, and I want to be clear, SBIRs not only work with the DoD, I don't know, NIH has them as well as the Department of Energy, and we actually support a few of those, but most of the ones we work with are with the DoD and NASA. And what these companies do is that they look for what's called letters of support. A letter of support is nothing that we will put in writing that we will actually fund the program or we will insert this in our program, but we do give an indication to the customer that we've reviewed their technology and find a feasibility threshold, and that we see that their technology is innovative, and should it progress, we could find conversations with our own technical leadership or the DoD program leaders that we know and see of ways that the maturation or the technology can mature to meet some of the platform needs. So we have a process where the DoD lists all kinds of topics. They do it in 3 rounds. We call them the dot one, the dot two, the dot three. NASA usually releases it once a year. They can be at, depending on the timing of the solicitation, these can be up to 200 different topics. Our Lockheed Martin corporate team actually reviews these topics and sends them out to our subject matter experts and our technical leadership, and they work with us to pick which topics actually are parts of technology that we are really looking for. Where is this that would fit in our technology roadmap? Where is those gaps that it would align with very nicely? And we socialize, we then compile that list and into an actual spreadsheet, and we socialize that to companies that register on our website. So everybody knows what topics we're interested in. These are often not just Lockheed Martin is, by the way, 4 business areas. I work in space. And so the other business areas might be interested in ones that space is not interested in, or there is often cases where this is technology that would meet a couple of business areas, and we both get together and we will review those. So that kind of explains, how we support the SBIRs. And those letters of support mean a lot to the program leaders within the DoD as well as NASA.
Great, 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 great. Okay, so I'm a space startup and I'm interested in participating in these programs. What's the best way for me to get started?
Well, I would definitely go to educate yourself on SBIR and STTR and what makes a good proposal. You may think you have a great idea and just start saying, here's my great idea. Would you please fund it? That's pretty much a recipe for not getting awarded. I encourage all companies to really go into depth of reading the solicitation, understanding the problem the government's trying to solve, and then if they look like and if they qualify, they have to be a US based company. I believe they have to be 51% owned within the United States, and they must be 500 employees or less. If they meet that simple criteria, they also need to get a cage code and a DUNS number. I won't go into what that means, but there are some basic requirements that the government puts on a small business before they could even solicit to this topic. And so, if they meet those minimum requirements, then, they go and find us. I gave you a link. We can talk about it later, but it's very easy to find us. You just go into Google, Lockheed Martin, SBIR. That'll find our website. You have to register. That way we can know which companies we're working with. We can keep them in the database, and then you get that email that explains which topics that we're interested in. And, that's hopefully I answered your question. I think I got a little off track, Lisa. You wanted to know how companies should go to SBIRs, not necessarily working with Lockheed.
Right. Well, either or. I mean, that was a great answer. So that's great. So that would be how we connect with Lockheed. Are there things that we should be doing just as general space
Sure. I
startups
didn't mean
to
to
yeah.
get with general space startups. I would really recommend within the solicitation, there is usually some literature that is referenced. And this is what the technical point of contact, the acronym is TPOC. Sometimes you'll say, have you talked to the TPOC? So this is the customer, either NASA or DoD, that is the technical leader that is actually writing the topic problem, right? They're the ones that are putting out what the problem they want to solve, what they expect the innovation to deliver on. They might give some specifications, and often they will give references. And I encourage companies to really go through and find those references and read them. I mean, they may be 20 years old, they may be even longer than that, but that's where the thinking of that TPOC is. And there's a reason that they reference those documents. So that gives an idea of the thinking. I would encourage also one of the questions we always ask small companies is, have you spoken to the TPOC? Now, not every solicitation the TPOC is made available. That's one on the DoD, but most often they do. Most often they will give a time period, a very short window where they will address questions either by email or sometimes they give a live chat. I encourage them to do this. Now, they may not get the answers that they want. They may, they may, some of these, they may be very general. They may be not able to give you some of the specifics you're looking for, but you should be able to get some guidance onto, hey, this is what I was thinking of doing. Are you looking for your technology to be doing A, B, or C? So whenever we talk to small businesses, that conversation comes up. Did you have a chance to talk to the TPOC? And if they say yes, I know that's good. They've done a little bit of homework.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. Okay, so what are some of the secrets to actually winning these contracts?
Well, I think there's a whole methodology to writing a proposal for the DoD. I would also encourage people to look online. There's probably books you can buy. There's none that I really feel comfortable recommending, because that would be something Lockheed Martin would be recommending. But those are areas. Many small businesses actually hire on consultants. Those have been found to be successful. I see some work better than others. Again, I don't want to promote one or the other, and that's always an expense that you're taking on besides winning. At the phase one, that's a pretty small level. I would encourage really reaching out to, again, the TPOC, seeing the literature that's out there on the SBIR, how to write a proposal, and being very clear about how you're going to address the problem. And I think that's really what we want to see. We don't want to see necessarily, I have this major technology that I think I created, or I might have some IP on, and nothing really set in stone, and some words thrown together, very vague, that it's going to change the world. No, be very specific about how your technology is going to address the problem.
Got it. Okay. So, how are these valuable, I guess, to startups that are trying to, I guess, enter a market, commercialize the technology? How does this help them propel their business forward? Is this a valuable way to do that?
I think it's enormously valuable. Um, First of all, the government is still a major customer. They're a major innovator and the major funder of space technology. So the sooner you work with members of the Space Force, there are still some areas of space that still work in the Air Force. The Navy and Army also have space programs, though they're not as big, as well as NASA. You will start to understand the language of requirements. You will start to understand the pathways to flight qualification. The cost of launch has dropped dramatically. So now it is much easier to get things into launch, but still, we still need very sophisticated processes to be able to work in space. So I think it's very helpful for the SBIR and STTR program to sort of give you those access to those customers, those DoD and NASA customers that can really help you understand the pathway to flight qualification. I think especially working with a prime like Lockheed Martin, we have a much better idea of platforms, and at the component level, we don't tend to make new components. That would be very difficult for us to be making new components left and right. So we really rely on the small business infrastructure to come up with those new and innovative ideas. And that SBIR program and STTR program is the way we can also, besides our DoD and NASA customers, the way we can get exposed to those new ideas in a very easy format that we set up and run through the SBIR program. If we were to just, ask for solicitations and make our own RFIs, that would be way too difficult. And really, it would be hard to understand what was important because we're not the ones who are funding it, it's the DoD who's funding it.
Right, right. Okay, so I've seen a lot of companies be very successful in getting phase one contracts, but moving to that phase two or even further to phase three tends to be a bigger leap. Are there, I guess, is there advice that you have for moving from a phase one and getting that phase two and beyond?
Well, if I knew how to make that valley of death, leap, I probably wouldn't be working at Lockheed anymore. No, I wouldn't. I that's a great question. That's a difficult one to ask. I know from my experience, it's really a 10%. So a 10% of all awardees get the phase one, and then that's whittled down to maybe 10 or 5, even 5 or less percent to get to the phase twos. And so I really believe, some of it is heritage. Some of these companies have a trust within the customer, and that's a difficult for new entrants. I think we're trying, in fact, if you see the way the SBIR legislation was changed, they really want to get away from companies that they call research houses. um, but there is that still a part of space is really not developing not something just as novel, but really, how is it going to qualify, right? What I was
Mhm.
talking about before. What is your path to making sure that this could be integrated into one of our platforms? We're going to put it up in a zero G environment and it's going to actually work. And so companies that don't have the resources that or don't have the foresight to see that might be one of the tripping points. But I can
Mhm.
tell you there's a lot of very good companies that have not made that leap. And it's a tough go. I think if the DoD could, they would probably do more. But and that is the budget that they have, and they have to select just a few winners.
Sure, sure. Okay, so if someone wanted to learn more about these programs, what would you advise?
More of the SBIR or SITR programs, or
Yes.
well, it's interesting that you say that because what's been spinning in my mind too is that the Air Force about 5 years ago changed who was doing it for the Air Force, and it's an organization called AFWorks. AFWorks, more than the other DoD branches, whether that be the Navy or the Army or even NASA, is really on a huge outreach exercise. And so they do a lot of seminars. I believe they even have maybe a weekly webinar. You would have to look it up. I'm not here to promote AFWorks, but they definitely do things a lot differently. And in fact, I just talked about learning requirements, but AFWorks also has the open topic, which is a very interesting and novel concept, which is essentially, bring us great technology. So bring us a solution and we'll find the problem. You can imagine that's a lot different way of looking at it. I'm not here to judge if that's good or bad. That's really not for me to say, but it is definitely a different way of doing the SBIR process. So
Mm.
that is something different. So I encourage to look online. There's plenty of free YouTube seminars all about SBIR program, and I would go to the SBIR.gov site. I mean, there's a lot of information there. The government tries its best to socialize exactly how these programs work and how they can be successful. And you really have to start just go to the sites that the fact that the government's already paid people to do. And so they're not trying to sell you anything. They're just trying to encourage the small business and the new non-traditional community to apply for these SBIRs and sitters.
Sure, sure. Okay, great. And if someone wanted to learn more about how they could work with Lockheed Martin Space on these types of programs, where would they learn about that?
I would send them to Lockheed Martin supplier SBIR. I would put in the Google SBIR Lockheed Martin. I think I gave you the link that we'll put on later.
Yep.
Just go to that link. There's a registration site that shows you how to, again, you're going to need a DUNS number. You're going to need a cage code. I mean, you're not going to get a SBIR award without those. And so I can't answer any of those kind of questions, but hopefully if you go register to that site, questions will come upon I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm sure someone might be asking me questions on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to try to do my best on how to work with us, and we have a good format. We've had good feedback both from our customers as well as our small business clients that we do perform this task really well, and we're very, very supportive of our small business community. It helps us maintain an excellent supplier rating, and so we take all this with a real source of pride of our working with the small business community.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for making time to be here today, Joe. It has been so informative, and thank you so much for all your insights.
Sure thing.
Okay. We hope to have you on again real soon.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.